Philosophy and literature are two cornerstones of our civilization. Varied reading allows us to understand different schools of thought from different countries and further come together as a global society. And Chinese people like to use a lot of poems and idioms. So what do you usually do to avoid misunderstandings when translation?
Well, that's a very challenging job because there's a vast difference between the two cultures, English and Chinese, and also linguistically, they are very different. So we are not actually translating the Chinese characters word to word. We have to find the hidden meaning behind the characters and try to explain it in proper English, English accessible to our vast audience outside China. For example, there are a lot of terms. When we translate, we would try to avoid to give people a very, very sharp and uncomfortable feeling. 头破血流, that's one example. Actually, when we translate, we will say, if you are trying to bully somebody, you will be 头破血流 instead of 头破血流, broken heads and blood, spilling blood. We would say you will bound to fail. That's really what the Chinese want to say.
Yeah.
Right.
So you mean that when we're doing the translation work, and not to only find the word-to-word equivalent, but to find the meaning like exactly in that context, right?
That's exactly.
Even as an example, this notion of 和, that English we often translate it as harmony. But harmony in the Western cultural tradition is a kind of mathematical, musical kind of an idea. But in the Chinese tradition, harmony is something like 共享. It's trying to get the most out of your ingredients. And so, so harmony really doesn't do the job, you know, if you want to communicate the idea to your audience.
So sometimes we have to add certain things. Harmony in diversity, harmony but not uniformity. That way people will understand us.
To be more specific.
Right. We have to convey the cultural meaning rather than what the character in surface represents.
Exactly.
Ms. Wang, we have Chinese phrases like 上善若水 or 君子谋道不谋食, which is Chinese ancient literature. So what do you think is the most difficult part in the translation? And normally, how would you cope with it?
When we translate these terms, as you mentioned, we have to go back to the Chinese original. How do you translate total Bali? From the surface, it means you give me a peach, and in appreciation, I'll give you a plum. We have to go back. The editors, the translator, go back to where the term came from 小雅, minor hymn, more than 2,000 years ago. Right, 诗经, right. We found that in that time, where the term came up, peach and plum means the same fruit. So you're not underpaying something. It's just a different term for the same thing.
For an old professor, people will say, 桃李满天下. You know, that your peaches and plums are all over the world. And this expression is a beautiful expression, and it means that you have students all over the place. But it doesn't mean that the Tao are the really good students and the Li are something less.
They're equally good.
They're equally good.